Mr. President, we have just learned that Ahmed Abdul-Qadir Warsame was arrested by the United States military in April. This news has just come to us, learning that this man, who fought for no country and wore no uniform, and under international law is considered an enemy combatant and therefore not a prisoner of war or an American civilian criminal, has been taken to a U.S. criminal court to be granted full U.S. constitutional rights in a prosecution in the civilian courts of the United States located in the Southern District of New York. This man was taken outside American territory for attacks outside U.S. jurisdiction, for acts against non-U.S. citizens. And yet he has been charged with a U.S. civilian crime and been given the full rights of an American citizen or nationalized individual. And I think we have made a grievous mistake. We have made a significant change just this week. We have violated the principles set forth by President Lincoln and President Roosevelt, who well used military commissions to handle enemy combatants and not providing them full U.S. constitutional rights for actions taken outside the United States against non-U.S. citizens in the war on terror. I'm very worried that this foreign terrorist who was taken abroad for attacks committed abroad is now going to have the full constitutional right to confront his accuser and have all information used in his trial exposed. This means that under the new policy, the United States may be forced to reveal intelligence information critical in the war on terror, especially against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and Al-Shabaab, when otherwise a military commission could have kept that information confidential, leading to further success by the United States. We should ask at what cost this prosecution will come. The previous proposal by the president, which he backed away from, was to bring the author of the 9/11 attack, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, to central New York at a cost of estimated $75 million to protect the court, the judge, the prosecutor, the jury, and their families. The president backed away from that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed decision, but apparently he has now made that decision again with regard to Ahmed Abdul-Qadir Warsame. My question is this: what threat is now being posed to the people of New York? What threat is being posed to the federal judge? What will the prosecutor fear for the rest of his or her life in participating in this unnecessary civilian prosecution? And especially for the jurors and their families that now will be subject to scrutiny throughout the jihadist world by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Shabaab. Why is this unnecessary threat now going to be posed to these Americans? That's why 39 Republicans and Democrats joined me in a letter to Attorney General Eric Holder, saying that this decision was a mistake and should not be repeated. That we have now created undue attention to the people of New York by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda itself, and Al-Shabaab. And remember, following our successful attack against bin Laden, we now estimate that Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Shabaab are the most dangerous and heavily armed subsidiaries of Al-Qaeda. Al-Shabaab alone has over 8,000 men under training. And as one intelligence expert said, some of them at the level of training equivalent to a U.S. Army Ranger. How are we going to protect the judge in this case for the rest of his or her life? How are we going to protect the prosecutor for the rest of his or her life? And how are we going to protect the jury and their families for the rest of their lives because of this mistake made by the Attorney General of the United States? At what cost will this prosecution come? And will it be paid by the city of New York, already heavily strained in finances, a New York State famously short of funds, or the federal government, which is also short of money? And what happens if Ahmed Abdul Qadir Wadsame is found innocent. Many released terrorists, we already know, have already returned to jihad, as the probability indicates he surely will. In the wake of the debate on deficits and debt, on a famous criminal trial in New York, we may have overlooked a fundamental decision, a mistake made by the Attorney General of the United States. The 9/11 Commission taught us a critical lesson, that terrorism is not a law enforcement problem. It is an intelligence and military problem. And well-established principles under Roosevelt, Lincoln, Bush, and yes, President Obama, using military commissions, should be used instead of subjecting the American people to the increased threat, the increased cost, and the terrible precedent we have just set in giving an international terrorist for acts committed overseas against foreigners full constitutional rights. It is a decision I think that we will regret, and many of us may quote the 9/11 Commission report and its clear findings in highlighting the error that was made. And with that, Mr. President, I yield to the gentleman for Louisiana.